Dewey, thank you so much for joining me.
You are welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Um, I suppose I wanted to start off by asking you, it's always interesting for me to speak with other therapists because I know what drew me into this world. It wasn't necessarily a choice. It was something that sort of came from need and desperation in my early 20s when I was looking to find some reprieve from my own mental health issues. I hear that a lot. I tend to hear that from other therapists too, but it's not always the case. But I wanted to extend that thought or that question to you. What brought you into this world of therapy? Yeah, if we could start there.
Yeah, it would. Thank you for asking that. Um, I did not grow up thinking I would be a therapist. That's not where I began. I had, are, are you familiar, and some people in your audience might be familiar with this, in 1970 on the Kent State campus in Ohio,
No.
the National Guard shot and killed four students.
Oh, right.
Um, and wounded a number of other students. There's a song by Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young called "For Dead in Ohio." Do you remember that song?
That rings a bell. Yes. Yeah, I
That's
can
what
sort of
that song is about.
I see. Okay.
I had graduated from Akron University with a degree in mechanical engineering and physics. And Kent State's about 12 to 15 miles from Akron. And through a whole series of events I was protesting against the Vietnam War, and I
Mm,
was protesting for civil rights. And on May 4th in 1970, I was on the campus in the group of students where the National Guard opened fire and killed four
mm,
students.
mm,
Um, and I had I had graduated. I had a job at Rubbermaid already, Rubbermaid, company Rubbermaid in research and development. And after the shootings, I was going, I can't do this.
mm,
Um, and a friend of mine was the director of a camp down in Southwest Ohio that was beginning an outward bound program based off of other outward bound programs. And he invited me to come down there.
mm.
Um, So I called Rubbermaid and said, thank you very much. I'm not going to come in. And they basically said, well, you're not going to be an engineer with us then. I said, well, I don't think I'm going to be an engineer at all.
Mm, mm.
Um, so I went down and spent the summer at that camp. And at the end of that summer, I came out to Colorado to backpack and camp. And um, it's sort of a funny story with that. But the bottom line is I never left. I left long enough to go get my stuff in my little Volkswagen and load it up and come back to Colorado.
Right.
So, um, and my first night in Colorado, I thought I was sort of hot shit, so to speak.
Okay.
But I had been camping in Southwest Ohio, not at 10,000 feet in Colorado. So
Mm,
the woman, I came out here with a woman named Linda, who I'm actually still friends with. Um, and we were in this little pup tent with little sort of horrible sleeping bags. And we were like at 10 or 11,000 feet where we were going to camp. And someone came by and said it was going to snow. And the sky was clear. We said, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. And in the morning, we woke up under 6 or 7 inches of snow and in a little pup tent that had no fly. And so I learned about how to camp in a different way than I came in.
yes.
So, and from there, I went back and uh, I ended up being the first house parent in Colorado for um, adult men who were developmentally disabled
Mm,
to move from institutions into um, living in the community. And that's where I got really, really interested in working in mental health.
mm.
Went back and got another bachelor's degree and then went and got a double master's. And then I went into Gestalt training, 4 or 5 years of Gestalt training after that, and then training in Reiki and body and breath work.
Right.
So that was over a long period of time. But
Yes, yes. When you went back and started studying psych, I'm assuming, I could be wrong, but I'm assuming a lot of it at the time was very psychoanalytic, very Freudian, neo-Freudian. Could you tell me a little bit more about what you were actually studying then and then how you came
well, it
across
was
Gestalt?
actually, it wasn't Freudian or analytic, it was more behavioral.
Oh, yes, okay.
And there was some analytic and Freudian work in there, but it was far more behavioral,
Mm,
and I sort of hated it.
mm,
And my degree was double. It was special education and counseling. You and at the time in Colorado, you could not be licensed as a therapist unless you had a PhD.
all right.
Um, so most of it was like behavioral and that's actually what after I graduated and I started working in a school as a therapist because you could work in a school and I later became principal of that school. That's when I went, I need something different.
Mm,
And actually the way that worked out for me, I had gone through so much and I'd not dealt with it. Um, so I went into therapy myself.
mm,
And the therapist I went to was a Gestalt therapist.
mm.
And it was like, oh, this actually makes sense to me.
Yes.
And it was through him that he encouraged me to go back to then it was called the Gestalt Institute at Denver. And that's when I started studying Gestalt.
That makes sense. It's the antithesis almost of behaviorism, isn't it? If behaviorism is all about
Totally.
objectifying an individual and seeing them as a series of conditioned responses, Gestalt's all relational and it's so eloquent. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, and I think there's a place for some working with some behavioral stuff.
Mm,
Um, I mean, it's a little bit uh, it's like sometimes we have to learn to stop hitting our head against the wall to so we can do some other things.
mm,
And so I think there is a place for some level of learning that and working with that just to change enough behavior so that somebody can be in relationship.
mm.
But I don't think it changes. I think it changes behavior, but I've not seen it changes from the inside out.
Yeah, yeah.
And again, I think there's a place for that sometimes to, uh, to stop hurting ourselves in some ways or uh, to change a certain behavior so you don't get fired from a
Mm.
job. Those kind of things. But again, it doesn't change us from the inside out. It just changes our behavior.
One of the most beautiful and also probably the most difficult things to grasp when it comes to Gestalt therapy is what it actually is and how it can be defined. I think people you know, they tend to talk,
Exactly.
but this is where you come in, and I've listened to you, and your definition of Gestalt therapy is so beautiful and succinct. It's often referred to as it sort of rests on three pillars of dialogue, phenomenology, and field theory. But I'd love to just give you the microphone here and tell me about your definition, how you came to mean
Mm,
it as such, and
okay.
yeah, go from there.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And um, if you want, I mean, I would also be happy to share a longer definition. I'd actually have to read it because I don't have it memorized
Yes,
of the work that we do with horses.
beautiful, beautiful.
Um, but the our what I did to come up with this definition, because you're right. I mean, one of the interesting pieces about Gestalt is when a lot of people contributed to Gestalt therapy. And actually, many people know that Fritz Perls did that, but Laura Perls was probably, if we're going to be really upfront about it, probably added more to it than Fritz did.
Mm, mm,
Um, and Hefferline and Goodman brought in a lot of stuff, and then there were other people that followed that. Um, so it does feel like sort of a quote mixed up kind of a therapy. The definition that we've come up with is the exploration of our experience in and of relationship while in relationship. That's
mm,
what Gestalt therapy is from our perspective. And there's a lot that goes into that. Um, but when we can be in any relationship and explore the relationship we're in as well as other relationships, then we can begin to look at, then that forms the ground that we can work with and change and grow with and from.
mm,
Um, so that's why I'm saying the exploration, because it's not just a thought process, it's an experiential process of, so it's the exploration of our relationship in and of relationships. So that brings in the uh, systems field perspective
right.
because we can be in a relationship and we can watch what's happening in other relationships so we're of that relationship and do that while we're in relationship, which is one of the pieces that brings us to in therapy is that our relationship with our therapist, if we're the client person, whether we're individual or couples or family, is one of the primary parts of change or one of the primary pieces of change is actually our relationship with our therapist.
Mm,
And many times that can become a very um, deep relationship that, and sometimes it's the deepest relationship we have maybe ever in our life up until that time.
yeah.
It, many times, and I'm happy to go back to some other definitions if you want in a bit, but the many times the relationship that we have with our therapist is the most intimate relationship we've ever had, especially if we've had some attachment issues. And
Mm,
when I'm talking about intimacy, I'm not talking about sex. I will
mm,
be 1000% clear about that. Um, but people come in and share with us about, you know, perhaps being sexually abused or share about being abandoned or share about some other sort of abuse or some other sort of loss. And those are incredibly, incredibly intimate processes.
yeah.
And uh, and I don't know what your experience is as a therapist, but I've had people, like many people, come in and go, "You are the first person I've ever shared X, Y, and Z with."
Mm,
And and I'll say, "Well, you've been married for 12 years. You haven't shared that with your husband or wife or partner."
mm,
And they'll say no. And it's like, so that depth that's the depth of relationship that I'm talking about oftentimes.
yes. Yes. And do you feel that? I mean, as you mentioned before, there, the word intimacy seems to in our culture just carry sexual connotations alone, but just providing a space where people can learn about the different ways to be intimate in itself creates the depth that people are often looking for that isn't or wasn't often given by our parents, you know, and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an intimacy that, and I sort of teach about a continuum around how to get there.
Mm,
Um, and I do and have done a lot with um, attachment and attachment work. Uh, our initial attachment to both of our parents, but particularly with our mothers,
mm,
it's an unbelievably intimate relationship. We have when a child is born, we have been inside our mother's body for 9 months. I don't know how we can get more intimate than that.
mm,
So that's a kind of intimacy that I'm talking about. And um, and you're right. There are many times people will, mistake intimacy with sexuality. And unfortunately, a lot of people have sex and there's no intimacy at all. Their
yes.
genitals are doing something together with each other, but there's no true intimacy. Um, so what I'm looking for and I'll just share this because it might be helpful to people, is and and I have a particular definition of contact. Um, but when we are able to make contact, and contact is predictable and consistent between two beings, that creates connection.
Mm,
And when connection is consistent and predictable over time between two beings, that's what actually creates relationship. When relationship is predictable um, and consistent between two beings, that's what creates intimacy.
mm,
And it's a knowing of the other person in many ways, or the other being. It could be with horses, it could be with dogs or cats or trees, but it's the depth of relationship of knowing of ourselves and another in relationship. Basically, what I say from the inside out, or another way to say it is we know it in our bones,
yes.
so
In
to speak.
in other words, there's just a felt meaning there, or how else would we describe the knowing in our bones?
Um, yeah, it's like a felt sense
Mm,
of when I, like, even right now, I could sit and allow myself to feel my relationship with Kimberly, who is my partner,
mm,
even though she went out to run a bunch of errands. It's like, oh, yeah, I can feel her. I can feel her energy, even though she's not here physically.
mhm,
Um, and it's that sense of knowing it. I think maybe the best way I could say it is from the inside out, not from the outside in.
mm. Yes, yes. Okay. So there's so many threads I want to pull on here, Dewey, but
We have time.
yeah, we totally have time. Exactly. One of the coolest things, um, I was telling you earlier about having a podcast is, you know, you can just talk to beautiful people that you're truly interested in. It's also really good feedback for me because I have a tendency to sort of just lose track and have little associations in my mind that go here and then here and then here. It helps me sort of stick within the
Hmm.
guardrails, so to speak. Um, I want to come back to this point about in and of relationship. So learning more about yourself and how you are when you're in relationships with other people by sort of having a your own subjective experience. So even right now, for example,
Hmm.
I'm feeling, um, close with you when we're talking, and hopefully our attunement ensues throughout the podcast. But then there's also a part of me that's watching myself feeling attuned to you. Is that what you're talking about when you're describing being in and of relationship, that objective, subjective experience, that dualism?
Um, on some levels, yes. Um, I actually don't make that much of a distinction between being aware of myself in relationship with you as well as being aware of sort of watching ourselves. I don't, to me, that's all one piece
Mm,
or one process. Um, are you okay if I talk about your wife coming in and saying hello?
of course, yes,
When your wife came in and said hello, which she's quite lovely, and I'm glad that I got to meet her,
yes.
is I had an experience of your relationship,
Mm,
like the kindness between you, the I, the the looks that you gave each other, the energy between you. I could have an experience of that, and that's what I'm talking about of relationship.
mm,
Um, so I wasn't necessarily, I mean, I wasn't a part of what was happening between you in the sense of like there's something happening between you and I right now,
mm.
which is I have that experience and I could have a sense of what was happening between you and your wife.
That makes sense. Okay.
And so and a lot of times it's the same kind of thing and I don't know if you run groups that often, but when there's a piece of work when I do a lot of group stuff, when there's a piece of work in the middle that I may be doing with someone who's in the group, sometimes that can be very intense and there's a lot of depth to that. But that's in the group watching is having an experience of what's happening in the group.
Yes.
And many times people will go, I felt exactly what you were feeling. And so that sort of that's more what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's the same kind of thing. I like earlier, I do a lot of stuff with horses, and earlier today I was setting up a clinic with some people up in Vancouver, and they were asking about uh, and there's another clinician that's going to do it with me, who's very good, and I have a ton of respect for this man. And but one of the other people were saying, "What do you when there when what do you how do you pick up what's happening to work with between the rider and their horse?" And part of what my response was is that I am part of that relationship.
Mm,
So I can feel that what's happening between somebody and their horse.
mm, mm. Okay, so
So does that make any level of sense and help
it
at
it
all?
makes a lot of sense to me, Dewey, and this is where I'd love to take us down two paths simultaneously if we can.
Okay.
I'd love because the podcast is essentially for um, you know current clients, potential clients who want to engage in more experiential therapies. Not that there's not a place for cognitive therapies as well, but just it's a sort of like a try before you buy thing, but it's also for clinicians too, like I wrote to you. Um, so I'd love it if you could, if you can, speak about if you're a therapist, how to cultivate that sense of feeling within yourself what is needed in that relationship to benefit, whether it's, rider and horse or husband and wife if it's a couple or you and the client alone. And then also what the client can expect by embarking on a journey of experiential therapy or Gestalt therapy.
Mm.
Really interesting.
How much do you know who Ian McGilchrist is?
Yes, I've read Divided. Oh,
Master,
what's yes, The Master and His
Master and
Emissary.
the Semester. Yeah.
Yes.
Are you familiar with what he speaks to from right and left brain
I
at all?
I got really interested in Alan Shaw's work as well with right brain
Yeah, Alan
psychotherapy.
and Ian actually are good friends.
All right, I didn't know that. Yes, there you go.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, this is going to be a roundabout answer,
Love it.
and hopefully it'll make some sense.
Yeah.
Both in Alan Shore's work, 'cause Alan talks a lot about um, uh, right brain and left brain also,
Mm.
and particularly in attachment. And so does Ian. And I had the honor of, I was on a podcast where Ian and I were being interviewed together.
All right.
We got to talk to each other, and um, actually, it was quite a wonderful experience. Part of the work that both he and Alan have done is that a significant amount of attachment work happens between right brain and right brain. Right brain of mom and the right brain of child, even, and that begins in utero.
Mm.
And they have been able to do fMRIs that actually show that. And what happens is when we're able to move into our right brain, which interestingly enough, if anybody's familiar with polyvagal work, is is one all of that information that comes from our neuroceptive systems and our oh gosh, I'm going to forget our ventral vagal.
Mm.
Actually, that whole system connects with our right brain,
Mm.
and so that the knowing comes from that system in one being picking up on the energy of that system in another being, and there's all kinds of proof that that can and does happen, and through fMRIs.
Mm.
So, but the biggest piece that we have to work on as therapists is our own attachment process. If we have not done that work, and ha, then what happens is our system isn't open to that energy coming in. Does
Mm.
that make any level of sense?
It actually resonates with me personally, Dewey. I think about my own attachment. Something else I wanted to talk to you about as well. How I've heard you talk about the spectrum of attachment as opposed to a categorical based understanding of attachment.
Exactly.
So important. I just love that. Definitely want to dive into that. But it speaks to me personally because I think about my upbringing and my attachment with my mum, who I'm very close with.
Mhm.
And I have this sort of um, real desire to enter into either almost as quickly as I can. I can sometimes sort of jump the gun when I'm with someone, um, or sort of rush the process. And
Mhm.
it's a struggle for me sometimes to really want to meet another there in that space, without sort of holding back and allowing it to sort of manifest organically. If that makes sense.
Um, do you want me to respond to that?
I'd be
Is
interested to
that,
you say, yeah, yeah.
well, are you familiar? I'm going to come in from two different ways. Are you familiar with satisfaction cycle?
No.
So I'm going to start with that and hope I don't mess it up because, but the satisfaction cycle actually starts with yielding. And it's a huge part of what happens between mothers and babies.
Mm,
Is both the mother yielding energetically and the baby yielding into mother's arms. Um, the next step is pushing. So the baby literally, many times you'll see a baby suckling and they'll be pushing with their hands.
mm,
The next step is reaching. The next step is grabbing, is grasping, and the next step is pulling back in and then yielding again. So the beginning of allowing that connection is actually yielding, which is different than trying to step in.
yes.
And so that's a sort of a and I'm trying to think. I cannot. I want to give the person credit for who came up with that, and I cannot remember her name, and I apologize. I want to be clear that I've learned this from another person,
Mm,
and it's not mine. I'm not trying to claim it, and I apologize that I cannot remember. Probably some at some point during the podcast I will.
it'll come back, right? It always does.
Right. Um, but the other piece I think that's like really important is, and this is a piece that we teach a lot with horses
Mm,
and teach a lot with and also with working with attachment is the concept of creating an opening for another being to step into and being available for contact when that person steps in.
mm,
And um, and I actually have videos of doing that with horses. Like a lot of people will try to lead a horse and they end up pulling on a horse, and that's a very different process. And let's say you have lead rope and it's called a loop, which is a slack lead rope, is to actually be able to turn around and create an opening which horses will feel,
mm,
and they'll just walk into it because
mm.
they want contact. But so our job in this whole process is to actually create an opening, allow whomever to step into that opening, and then our job is to be available for contact when that person does, or horse or dog or husband or wife or whatever the relationship is, or client and therapist.
Creating an opening.
So,
Mm,
so much of our work is, it sounds passive, but it's not because we're creating the opening. And that's a very active process.
mm, mm. Let's dive into horses then. I think that's a really wonderful segue. So
Okay.
I've learnt a
They
little
have four
bit.
legs. They have a
Exactly.
head.
What is a
Most of them
horse,
have a
Steve?
tail still.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. What
Okay.
is a horse? Episode 220. I've learnt a little bit about it through Siobhan, who you obviously met before. But why horses? What is it about horses specifically that make working through attachments and learning about ourselves in relationships so palpable is the word I
Sure.
was trying to use. Yeah.
Um, I like just changed. I hope it looks okay.
Yep.
So let me start off with this with that piece here. Let me adjust this because that's better.
Mm,
Um, one of the, I'm going to back up a little bit. One of the reasons that people really oftentimes give for working with horses is that horses are prey animals. And in the wild, they are. That
Mm,
there's truth to that. And what a prey animal, what that means is that a prey animal doesn't hunt for food. You know, they're not stalking and like a lion or a tiger or a bear. They're not stalking and hunting for food. They're they can end up being food.
mm,
The horses are incredibly powerful, so a lot of times they don't. They're actually we in the work that I do, we redefine what prey means. So, and what I mean by that is if I'm in the wild and run across a lion or a bear, or if I'm in the wild and a horse gets pushed into a corner, I'd much rather be around a lion or a bear than I would a horse pushed in the corner.
mm,
So there's this underlying sense that prey means unable to protect themselves, unable to. If you look at many of the prey animals are faster, smarter, more relational, et cetera, et cetera.
mm,
So, um, but initially, a lot of people spoke about horses being prey. There is a place in there where the way that horses become not prey is through relationship. And because they're in herds, they're relational, they're protective of each other, they're protective of their young, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one reason.
mm,
The other reason, and a lot of times when we have gone through really tough times in our life, we end up feeling like prey. Like when people talk about having experienced trauma, one of the biggest things that they end up having experiencing is that they feel like they were prey.
mm.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Oh, definitely. Yes.
And what horses do is that they go into a relationship when they feel like they're prey. What we do is we end relationship or we inhibit relationship when we feel like we're prey.
Mm,
So that's one of the pieces. But the other piece that two or three other pieces that are so important is horses are incredibly relational. The only thing that really scares a horse is incongruency.
mm,
So, um, so when people walk up to, well, many times what has happened is when people have attachment issues, when they have been traumatized, when they end up feeling like they're prey, they end up, as a person, they end up being horribly incongruent.
mm.
Instead of walking through the world and saying, I'm afraid, I don't know what to do, I might get hurt, we try and we try and make ourselves tough and get through stuff. That makes sense?
It you just said it so it really makes sense because yeah, my mind's going in all different sorts of directions about the importance of being congruent. So it makes a lot of sense.
Right. So if I'm walking up with somebody to work with them and a horse, and maybe even they're afraid of horses,
Mm,
people go, well, we have to be quiet, and I have to pretend like I'm not afraid, and I have to pretend like, and it's like, actually, no, let's begin right now. It's when you walk up to XYZ horses, whichever one of my horses you walk up to, what I want you to do is walk up. I want you to be as afraid of outwardly as you are inwardly. And I want you to tell this horse how afraid you are.
mm.
And they look at me like I'm nuts. And about 3 steps toward the horse, whichever horse they've chosen, when they're walking up and saying, I'm so afraid of you, I'm going to pee my pants, or I'm going to
Mm,
feel like I'm going to faint, or things are going to be horrible. horses go, ah. And so what horses do is they help us learn how to be congruent.
Mm.
And and what I've seen in the beginning is that when that begins to happen with somebody, as soon as we're congruent with our fear or our hurt or our anger, what happens to it? That actually begins to dissipate. I mean, I don't know what your experience is in your relationship, but if I have something going on where I get upset with Kimberly, but I pretend like I'm not upset, we don't do well.
Yes,
And
me
if I
too.
say, babe, I love you and I'm upset about this, it's done in 3 minutes.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
So so congruency is one of the big pieces. Relationship is another piece. People being able to be feel the energy of our horses and our horses feeling their energy.
Mm.
Um, the other piece that happens is that horses never lie. We as humans lie all the time. I mean, even if it's a little lie where someone says, "How are you today?" and you go, "Fine."
Mm.
And 3 minutes before you just got off a call where you're upset about something.
Mm.
Um, so not only can we learn congruency, we also learn integrity. And we have to have those aspects work. We have to be clean and clear with those aspects to work with horses well. Another aspect is that horses actually respond to pressure and release, and we respond to pressure and release. But we don't never hardly ever talk about that. But even when you were saying, I really want to make contact, I really want to be able to be intimate, that's a level of pressure.
Mm. Mm.
Sometimes someone goes, that's what I want to, and it works out really well. Sometimes it doesn't work out so well.
Mm.
So, um, so there's a whole piece of how do you come in and you can read what when pressure is happening. A horse will tell you when there's pressure, and learning to read that is one is we want to be read that way, and the people that we love and care about and the people that we're in relationship want to be loved read that way.
Mm.
Like I want to be able to read if I'm coming in too soon, too hard, too fast with
Yep.
anybody,
Definitely.
and be able to go, oh, okay, well, let me give you a release and let me give you some relief. Because again, that's what helps create trust.
Mm.
Um, Other reasons, and this is one of the main reasons I started working with people and horses, is because a lot of my career, I've done a lot with people who have had sexual trauma.
Mm.
And well, let me back up because let me do another piece first.
Mm.
The sexual trauma has been huge with people I've worked with. What's underneath that is attachment and attachment wounds and what I call fragmented attachment. And to really work deeply with attachment, we have to touch. We have to physically touch. Well, sometimes, and I don't know what the laws are in Australia, The laws in Colorado, you're it's not illegal to touch, it's illegal to touch sexually.
Hmm.
But if
Hmm.
someone's had sexual trauma, then that gets tricky.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, but the biggest piece that we need is to be able to be held and
Mm.
be able to be moved.
Mm.
Well, one of the things I can do is if I do mounted work with people and horses, I can, and this would be like with a bareback pad.
Mm.
And I'm doing, first of all, just being held by a horse is a really big deal. I cannot tell you how many people in therapy get up on a horse and within seconds they start crying
Mm.
and all kinds of emotions are released for a number of different reasons. One is because they're being held maybe for the first time in their life unconditionally.
Yeah.
Two is when we're on a horse, it changes what happens in our pelvis and it actually literally opens up our pelvis, which actually opens us up emotionally.
Mm.
And the other piece, and this goes into the attachment piece, is when a horse walks, their pelvis moves exactly like a pregnant woman's pelvis moves.
Wow.
And I actually have videos of that. I've had friends who are pregnant, and I say, "Will you walk and let me video you?"
Yeah, that's right. You know me well enough to know I'm not weird. Now let me get the
Yeah,
camera
exactly. It's been all above board, and it's like,
out.
and then I videoed horses walking, and their pelvises move exactly the same way.
Mm.
And so when we and you're right, I do have to laugh. It's like I can't. It's like, can I video you walking? And they are close friends, and it's like, well, yeah, I guess why? And so we go through that whole routine. But
That's just Dewey doing
um,
his thing.
yeah, but it's like it is the closest process that I know of to bring somebody back to that early, maybe even pre-birth experience of being moved and of being held. And I can do that with you know, a 75 pound kid, or I could do that with a 220 pound man.
Wow. Mm.
And I can do it really clean. And the other piece that happens is that in the work with people who have been sexually injured, it might be the very first time the inside of their thighs have been touched, that their genitals have been touched,
Mm.
that their pelvis has been moved, um, and that all of that's been done in the cleanest, most ethical way possible.
Yes.
Um, and um, And many times what happens is that when we've been, and this is a big statement, I know it's a big statement. So when we have been sexually abused, that goes back, and whatever attachment wounding we had from birth, that exacerbates that attachment wounding.
Mm.
So a lot of times we're working with both at the same time.
Mm.
Not
Mm.
always, but a lot of times.
That makes a lot of sense. And it also makes me think, I'm interested to hear what you think about this, but um, just this sort of corrective emotional experience that can occur by, being having that physical contact in that area, obviously, which is
Yeah.
highly sensitive, but also I think being held by a being, such as a horse that's more
Yes.
powerful as opposed, I mean, because sexual trauma. Obviously, sexual abuse is someone who has come in and perpetrated and controlled. So then to put someone who has had that experience done to them in a place where they are going to once again be controlled, but have it recalibrate is just so healing.
Yeah, to have that level of corrective experience.
Mm, mm.
And to be held in a way where there's I work I use a term called zero valence. And does that make sense? You know what I mean? Or should I explain
Yeah,
it a
if you
little
could
bit?
unpack it, that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I want to make
Well,
sure I'm being congruent.
beautiful. In in the world of physics and working with atoms and molecules, if a atom has a plus one charge, meaning an extra proton, that it has a one valence. If there's two extra protons, it has a valence of two.
Mm,
If it has an extra uh, um, electron, it has a negative valence of one or two, depending on how many. What zero valence is when it's balanced out.
mm.
So we can allow somebody to be on a horse where the horse is it has no judgment. The horse has no, they don't care who's up there. I mean, they don't care whether it's a man or a woman or their age or their skin color or their language or how long or short their hair is or
Mm.
none of those things. So they have zero valence around all that. So
Interesting.
all of that stuff gets to be removed from the picture, at least from the horse's perspective,
Mm.
which then allows people to do what they need to do without all of those other layers. Well, I'm a woman. Well, I'm a man. Well, I'm fluid gender. I, I mean, you name it.
Yes.
I have an Australian accent, or I have a Colorado accent, or I speak Spanish, or you know, it doesn't matter.
It's
And
beyond,
so
it's the holding beyond
the
identity and form and category.
truly, it's
Mm.
it's pure, unadulterated relationship.
Mm. Mm.
And then what's really cool about it is when that work happens, and and my preference and all the work, the equine work I do, especially if I'm doing mounted work. I only do mounted work on my own horses. I don't go other places and do mounted work
Mm.
because I don't know what those other horses know. Um, is what I know is when when I'm working with that with somebody, we can actually go through a progression where at some point people are actually riding the horse by themselves,
Oh,
whatever
wow.
horse. And so then it becomes a process of, and all the riding I do, and I know that I'm sure you know about Martin Buber and I thou, is what we've tried to bring in is the concept of I thou we.
Mm.
And so in working with horses, it's like someone will often say, well, I'm going to walk my horse or I'm going to trot my horse. And it's like, well, are you going to trot your horse or are you and your horse going to go trot together?
Nice.
Are
Nice.
you a we? Or because, and so then all of that relational stuff gets to be able to, people get to relearn how to do relationships. And then they can take that into whatever other relationships they're in.
And also too, do I'd love to hear you speak to this, but and it also just makes me think of what it would be like for someone to have that really wonderful, healthy regression, as Alan Shaw talks about, by mounting a horse and have it sort of mimic or closely feel like it was to sort of go back into the womb. It's almost
Mhm.
it's got a sort of starting over once again vibe to it. Um,
Yeah, totally.
which is just amazing. But one of the things that I'm thinking about as you're speaking here is how much relationship is non-verbal and how much we can actually learn specifically in couples or whatever it is, family members, of how to uh, make deeper contact, more intimate contact without even moving our
Hmm.
mouths. Um, what do you make of that? What do you?
Did you say without moving our mouths? Is that
Yeah,
what you
yeah,
said?
exactly.
I
Yeah,
totally agree with you. Yeah.
yeah. What
Yeah, 100%.
what do people make of that when they're working with horses, and what sort of insights do they gain?
Well, one of the interesting pieces, and this is a piece that Ian talks about and I love, is our right brain has language. And this is, I'm almost a little hesitant to say this. Uh, well, let me say it and then I'll circle back and qualify it a little bit.
Mm,
Our right brain has language, but it doesn't have speech.
mm,
It's our left brain that has speech. Now, my hesitation there is that there's so much connection between the two that there's some overlap. So I don't want to be quite so black and white about either of those.
mm,
When we really get another person, and I mean really get them, that's a right brain to right brain connection. There's a lot of language in there, but there's no speech.
mm.
That makes sense? Following
Yes,
what I'm
it's
saying?
I do, and I think often about how, perhaps when Siobhan and I are sitting together, and she might look up from her book or whatever, and I have an image or a metaphor or a felt sense pop into my body, and this seems to be exactly in alignment with what she's pondering or whatever it is.
Exactly.
Mm.
And yeah, exactly. And it's like the same way with Kimberly that she'll look at me and she'll just look at me and I sort of melt inside. It's like she doesn't have to say anything.
Yes, yes.
And horses do the same thing. Horses have a huge amount of language. They just don't have speech.
Mm.
And they're reading our body language and we're learning to read theirs. And and it's in that when we can get there, and I'm trying to come back to your question of what happens when we we literally are speaking without moving our mouths, is that's what's happening. It's like body language, movement, energetic process. We about 80 to 90% of all communication is that.
Mm.
When we allow ourselves to really go into it, we can make it close to 100%. And and that's what happens when we get to the I thou we part of it, we that communication happens without words.
Right, right. So the thou and the we, could you delineate the thou and the we, and why there is that necessity for having the we as well?
um yes, this is really good because I'm writing about this right
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Guarantee it wasn't scripted, everyone listening.
now. That's true. Actually, what this is a bit of an aside. Two friends of mine wrote a chapter that just came out in the AMA, which is American Psychological Association, on existential and Gestalt therapy. And they wrote it about my work.
Oh, wow, beautiful.
And the reason I didn't write it was because it wouldn't have been cool for me to write about myself.
Sure, sure. I think you get a green part, a bit of a hall pass there, Julie, but
Well, and it actually just came out. It it was just released today.
Oh, fantastic. I'd love to read if you could send me the
Um,
links. It'd be great.
yeah, it's actually in a 400 page book. It's one chapter in there, but I'll get you. I don't even have the link. I can give you the book, but I don't
Mm.
have the link to the chapter.
Yep.
Um, and part of it was about this. I I thou is different than I it. So I'll give a little background here.
Mm.
Where I it is objectifying the other. I thou is a process of not objectifying the other. But I thou does not necessarily mean that we're making contact.
Mm.
It just means that I can say, look at and where I live, there are a lot of elk around. There's like hundreds of elk that go through. And there are many times where I just have a sense about them, but we're not truly making contact. It's the contact of the I and the thou that creates the we.
I love that. Brilliant.
And so, um, and it's the same. I mean, we can how we do something is so important. Like we can look and a lot of the work I do too has been around working with objectifying women who have been objectified.
Mm.
And there's a big difference between objectifying a woman and going, and please forgive me for saying this, I'll say it in nice words, nice body.
Yeah,
And
totally.
that's all that a person sees.
Yes.
That's really different than going, the way this person moves and the fluidity which how they move is stunning.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
But I still may not know that person. I still may not have any contact at all with that person.
Mm.
But I'm not objectifying that person.
Yes. That makes sense. So
And it's the
I was just going to
oh, go
say,
ahead,
just
go ahead.
the way I understand that is, looking at someone who's really attractive, it's objectifying it as, the way you're describing them is almost they're a tool to use, something that you can maneuver for your own personal gain or whatever it is. But
Exactly.
admiring their beauty, like, oh, this person's stunning or beautiful or whatever it is, you experience them in their own sovereignty as a fellow human being.
Exactly. And
Mm,
the same way with horses. I'll be out riding and I'll go by someone and they hardly ever say hi to me. They just say beautiful horse.
mm, mm,
And but again, they're not objectifying in those scenarios, and there's still no contact.
mm,
It's just a process of seeing another as fully sovereign, as wonderful, knowing that they've had experiences in their life that are amazing, knowing that probably they've had experiences that haven't been so amazing, all of those kinds of things. But it's the contact between I and thou that creates the we. And and so that's the distinction that makes some sense to me.
it makes a hell of a lot of sense to me, Dewey. And I think that's really important as well. Thou is a beautiful sort of felt, just to paraphrase so I understand what you're saying there. It's a beautiful sort of felt connection with another being, but you're not necessarily in direct contact with that other being. So I can
Yeah, exactly.
appreciate a fellow human being or any other being on the opposite side of the dance floor, but only it's when the we is created when we actually start waltzing together almost. Or
It's a beautiful way to say it. Absolutely.
okay, okay.
Yeah, and so and to me, and anybody can have whatever perspective they want on this. To me, that we that happens with that contact And that's circling back around to working with horses. Like we can groom and I'm not going to lose my train of thought here, I promise.
Yeah.
We can groom a horse and still objectify a horse,
Mm.
or we can groom a horse and be in contact and create a we with that horse. Does that make sense?
The way I understood that then was I could groom a horse, or I could, we have three beagles here. I could, groom my beagle or whatever it is, and see it as a chore, something that I have to do.
Yeah,
Versus an experience to come into deeper relationship with the animal.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And when there's that relationship, and this is where I was going with this, when we create that weed, there's a sacredness in that.
Mm,
And um, and my perspective is that's what we all long for. That's in our relationships in life and in life itself, is that sacredness of the we that inhabits the space between I and thou.
I completely agree with you as well, Dewey, because I think that you mentioned the word existential before, and obviously Gestalt is very existential in many ways. But I think that one of the best ways to assuage our existential isolation in the world is to learn how to deepen relationships with others.
100%. Yeah.
You know, what when people come to you with um, existential difficulties, whether it's uh, a loss of meaning in life or feeling alone in the universe, um, what are some practices that you typically employ, whether it is using a horse or whatever, to help them with that?
Well, I I usually, first of all, I try to look at when somebody comes to me with that, to be blunt about it, I sort of go, okay, tell me about your attachment.
Mm.
I don't do it quite that bluntly, but
Sure. Yeah, yeah,
but something happened there. If
yeah.
somebody is walking, and that doesn't mean, let me clarify this. When we have a loss, for instance, many times we'll have an existential crisis. We'll go, why the heck are, you know, the world's not okay anymore,
Mm,
kind of feeling. So that's not what I'm talking about. Because just staying with that, what will happen is that we will pass through that. We'll work through that. But when somebody is really truly caught in, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what my worth is.
mm,
What use is there to live anymore? Those kinds of things. One of the things I think that we do as therapists is we miss the attachment piece.
mm,
We we literally, and again, I one of the pieces that's happening in my life right now is I'm working with a lot of veterans, and and the and when someone says I saw horrible things and et cetera, at some point I'm going to make sure that I connect back into their whole attachment process and what has happened there,
mm,
and to begin to help them get through that. Because when we have, and this is another big statement, when we have what I call, and I I try to come up with a good word for it in addition to healthy attachment, but when we have that healthy uh, integrated attachment,
mm.
then when something really tough happens, we can go back and depend on that healthy integrated attachment.
Yes.
when something really tough happens and we don't have that, and I call it fragmented attachment, that's my word
I
versus
love that.
insecure.
Yes.
Um, we we really there's nothing to go back to go, oh, this happened. My work is to go back to this, and I know what this feels like. So a lot of the existential stuff, I go back and I start working with attachment versus um, and that's where I begin heading. And what's interesting, I mean, I don't just go back and go. Someone goes, here's my experience in war, and I don't just go, what happened with your mother and your dad?
Yes,
There's
exactly.
a lot that happens in between there,
Totally.
just to be
Dewey, I
clear
just
about
lost
it.
my job. How's your dad?
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. Um, the but what I will say is if someone comes in and says, I just lost my job, the first thing I will say is, we'll get you through this.
Mm,
I don't even ask why they lost their job. I got it. We'll get you through this.
mm,
And they
mm,
go, how do you know? And I say, I just know. How do you know? Because I trust you. Well, I got fired because they didn't trust me. I know. I believe you. And I trust you right now.
mm.
I mean, that kind of process is like, um, because one of the pieces around working with this and around that integrated attachment is being able to know that we can go through a tough time in contact, in relationship, and come out okay.
Mm.
And if you look, excuse me, I've talked a lot today.
Yes.
If you look at every attachment theory in the world, including Alan Shore's stuff and Dan Siegel's stuff, and I've been fortunate enough to be able to hang out with Dan a little bit, and and even Ian's stuff
Mm,
is every attachment theory comes back to that. Can we go through a tough time in contact, in relationship, and come out okay?
mm,
And that's what happens every time a baby is hungry or they mess their diapers or whatever it is. It's like it, when we attend to that baby and attune to that baby, they're going through a tough time and coming out okay.
it's it's so foundational, isn't it? And you even find um, ideas of attachment in religious texts. You know, the prodigal son in the Bible. It's obviously
Totally,
extremely attachment based. I remember when I was learning about some of the Eastern, contemplative traditions, and the story of the unenlightened Buddha has got attachment written all over it. The only way he was able to go
totally.
out and really become enlightened is because he had a palace to return to when he saw someone sick, someone dying, and someone old and someone dying. It's just
Hmm.
everywhere. So it's not, we can sort of say that attachment theory is the big thing on social media nowadays, but it's just built into how we are in the world and everything that makes us who we are, really.
100%.
Mm,
And and the like the hero's journey is the attachment cycle.
yeah.
The um, um, oh gosh, uh, there's a word I'm trying to recall here. Like going out by yourself in the wilderness and spending time by
Mm,
yourself.
like solitude
Yeah,
and
yeah, the solitude. Can I make it through a really tough time? Is an attachment cycle.
Yes.
Even if you think about intense meditation retreats where people are literally sitting and meditating 8 to 12 hours a day, that's going through a hard time and coming out okay.
Mm, definitely.
It's like because I don't know if you've ever tried to sit that long.
No,
I've tried to.
yeah.
I don't make it that long.
Yeah. I last about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I got all the way up to 12 one time.
Oh, wow.
So,
Okay.
but you know, getting through even where we live. I mean, this winter we've gotten hardly any snow, but there's times we get 5 or 6 feet of snow.
Mhm.
And making it from and where the horses are is maybe 100 to 120 yards or meters. It's it's taken a half an hour to go that far sometimes.
Yeah.
But that whole process is even that is part of being able to go through a hard time and come out okay, where you can trust yourself.
And that's that pivotal point as far as I understand you speaking to here. It's just that, especially in the West, we love this idea of the hero's journey and individualism, and you can do it yourself and look how far you yourself can go. But you often find that people who really, quote unquote, pick themselves up by their bootstraps have a very healthy, safe place to return to. Not always the case. You sometimes get people who
100%.
have just run away from a terribly difficult upbringing, but that home base, that security, and I love your. Perhaps we can go into this in our next episode. But I love this spectrum-based understanding of attachment, fragmented to healthy, because there's so much more process-oriented as opposed to
Mhm.
insecure and secure, which sound very fixed and static, like they're almost like destinations.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually, when you look back at Bowlby's stuff, he didn't use those terms.
Mm,
He didn't use anxious and avoidant and disorganized. He did not use those. He talked about anxiety and he talked about avoidance, but he even used those on a continuum.
mm,
Um, and just real quick, I mean, my perspective is the fragmentation. I think to me that feels important.
mm,
And here's how I got to there, just so that you know.
mm,
I don't know that it was all that fantastically great on my part. It's one is when I would work with people and they knew anything about attachment, they would go, "Well, I'm avoiding attachment process," and then I might say something like, "Are you able to tell me what's happening for you right now?" Well, I'm anxious. I'm anxious telling you that I'm avoidant. And and I'm going, "Oh, okay." And it was like people slide all over the place.
yeah,
That's what we do.
yeah,
1 second we'll be disorganized, another second we'll avoid something, another second we'll be anxious about it, and then another second we do okay. And we're just not that pigeonholed as beings.
yeah.
Um,
Love that.
and then the other piece that I've seen is that people, when I would introduce the concept of do you feel avoidant or do you feel fragmented inside? And they'll go, oh, I feel like I don't know what I feel inside. There's all these
Yeah.
quote parts or all these little pieces that are like rumbling around. I go, okay, well that does that make more sense to see that you're fragmented?
Brilliant.
Let's help you bring all of those parts together and integrate those parts. Um, so the idea and I'd actually be interested because I know that you've studied Gestalt.
Mm.
is my perspective of Gestalt is we're not trying to end up with just parts that we can name. We're actually trying to reintegrate parts so that we're a fully integrated being instead of a mass of parts.
Yes.
And so has that been your understanding too?
That's definitely mine. I think that's one of the critiques of parts work, and I love
Exactly.
Dick Schwartz's books, but your point about having a, a a way of recognizing multiple self states, but you're not necessarily any one of those states. That's why I so resonate with your term around a fragmented um, relational style, because there doesn't, if someone who
Yeah,
identifies with that just doesn't know where they are. I feel like I'm really angry with this person and horribly terrified with this person, but where's the me that can observe and then also have a dynamic relationship with each of these parts versus someone who's healthy and has a sense of coherence. So I might feel anxious,
exactly.
but
Yeah,
I'm
exactly. And
that person, in other words. Yeah.
well, and each of even when we do identify some parts of ourselves, like the
Mm,
part of me that's this or the part of me that's that, is that's different for everybody.
mm,
So the idea of having pre-identified parts of the firefighter or the manager, I don't even know all the parts.
me too.
That doesn't make any sense to me because it it's like sometimes I'm protective, sometimes I'm not, sometimes I'm willing to fight, sometimes I'm not.
Yeah,
It might depend on how well I slept last night.
exactly.
And um, so I see that, and it's sort of like conceptually, and I don't think this is 100% accurate because it's probably too concrete, but it's like, the big puzzles, like the 1,000-piece puzzles that you can put together on your dining room table or
Yeah.
Thanksgiving or whatever holiday. It's like it's like that puzzle is only partially put together.
Mm,
And
mm.
sometimes there's this piece missing, but sometimes we can bring in this piece. That's sort of how I see the fragmented attachment.
Yes.
And part of what we're trying to do, or what we're trying to do, is to integrate all of our parts, even um, even if there's a part missing, which means, and what I mean by that is, and what people will ask me what started me on this whole attachment journey. My mother had tuberculosis when I was born.
Mm,
And I knew this is when I was born, I was whisked away. My mother was sent to a sanitarium. She was there for 18 months. And I didn't live with her. When I
mm.
moved back in, I was like literally the quote in the newspaper was I was like a neighbor child moving in.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I didn't know, obviously, then what was going on. And I didn't know, until I was in my 20s and I started working on some of my stuff that, oh, well, thankfully I had some really good people there, but I was left with some pretty big, a lot of puzzle pieces missing.
Mm, mm, mm,
Um, and I mean, credit to my mother, she would be willing to talk to me about it anytime I wanted to. I mean, so, and most of the attachment stuff that people go through, it's not because parents are horrible human beings. It's because they're sick or because they have their own attachment issues or,
yeah.
um, but it's like it it doesn't make any sense to me to put us in a box because um, that piece of my mother being sick, you can't put her in a box for that.
Mm,
we can't do that. I mean, it's not a fair thing to do.
Mm.
And it's not a fair thing to do to say, you know, I mean, did I feel abandoned? You bet I did. Was I abandoned? No.
Yeah, nicely said. Yeah,
So um, I think we need to be a little bit more fluid in how we look at some of this stuff.
me too. Me too, Dewey. Yeah, definitely. Um, I want to thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
You bet.
I really want to just let you know it's actually a really wonderful experience just being with you. Your energy is so grounding. I when you would well, actually before earlier on the show when you were telling me about how you experienced um, me being with Siobhan, I was getting quite emotional because it was wonderful to have um, that experience that I feel with her seen by another.
Mm.
Your voice is very calming, and yeah, it's been quite an experience.
Oh, well, thank you so very much. And I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed this. And I really do hope that we set up a second time
Yes,
and dive into, there's a bunch of stuff to dive into that could be really fun.
yes,
Um, and I, being able to talk with you this way is very settling. So thank you.
it's yeah, I've really enjoyed it, and definitely we'll get a second one organized. I think there's so many different threads that we weren't quite able to pull on today, but I know we will. I know we
Beautiful.
will.
Alrighty. Thank you so very much.